Good evening. We have a special guest speaker tonight, so we're actually going to switch stuff up a little bit more. Yeah, Tom, welcome. So we're going to switch up the program a little bit, and without further ado, I'm going to have Ginny introduce our guest speaker, and take it away.
Thank you, Mr. President. Years ago, I had the pleasure of knowing a little young man. No, he was a young man. He was little. Anyway, he would ride his bike to the sailing center, and he would complain bitterly he had to wear a life jacket. Well, everybody complains now about wearing a life jacket, including me. But meanwhile, as he got on in life, I've watched him, and it's exciting to see one of my kids. You know, I'm sorry, Garrett, you're one of my kids. I collect all these kids, and it's fun. Anyway, Garrett went on to work in the State House. I call it affectionately under the Golden Dome, and he was gracious enough to come tonight to talk to us. Unfortunately, he has children. And they're not at the sailing center yet, sir. Anyway, he has to pick his daughters up. So we're making an adjustment tonight on our speakers and our business meeting. And I would like you to give Garrett, who was a former Rotarian, a wonderful Rotarian clap. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What Ginny neglects to tell you is that I didn't like wearing the life jacket, not on the boat. I didn't like wearing it on the bike, driving all the way from Manatee Road down Fort Hill, down to the Rotary, because occasionally you'd get some older boys driving along that had some few choice words for you as you were wearing your life jacket on your bicycle. But I was one of five, and we only had one car for most of the time, and then when we had a second, my mother was basically the first generation Uber driver, and she just drove kids from here to there. So if you wanted to get to where you needed to go and you were on the older end, you figured it out. So, which we can only imagine today, really, telling your kid to drive from Manatee is over by the landfill all the way down to the harbor. We would never think of that. But it was a different time. It was a different town. It's still a wonderful community thanks to the hard work of so many people who've worked in local government to keep Hingham the gem that it is, and really the sort of the gateway to the South Shore when you look at the communities that we have beyond us and all the way to the Cape. And I'm always in awe of folks who serve in local government. At least I get paid for what I do. They go out, they volunteer their time on school committees and selectmen and various boards, and they nothing but for their love of the community. But I wanted to come tonight just to go over and let you know a couple things that's going on and really take any questions that you may have. As Ginny said, I grew up here in town. I was a member of the Lincoln Sailing Program, and I recall fondly the day that I was out in the harbor and sailed my little boat right along the side of a larger sailboat that happened to have a very sharp old spear on the front. And I ripped the sail, and I did. And my first mate in the boat said to me, "Are you nervous to tell your parents?" I said, "No, I'm nervous to tell Mrs. Gray." Having grown up here, I went to Plymouth River and then the Hingham Middle School, which was South Junior High then, and then I went to BC High and BC and then to BC Law, and then I came back to the community, to the county as a prosecutor, and then actually spent some time in the Hingham District Court. And I met my wife in law school. We were the same year at Boston College and didn't know each other, if you can believe that. And we went to law school together, and I remember staring at her, and she had this amazing knack of writing down everything the professor said without looking down between the lines for like an hour and 15-minute class. And my attention span was about 12 minutes. So I asked her to borrow her notes, and that led one thing to another, and here we are 3 kids later, and members of this community now since 1997 as a couple. So she actually works as a judge now, and she's mostly assigned to the Hingham District Court these days. She sees some familiar faces from time to time as jurors. And I've been in the legislature now. After being in the DA's office for 3 years, I ran the first time and I lost to Mary Jeanette Murray. And then 2 years later, I ran and I won, and when she retired. And I think really, especially in this day and age, and for those of you who remember that race, actually Jack Linsky was on the opposite side of that race working for Mary Jeanette. He told me I was going to lose. He was right. But then 2 years later, not only did he work for me, but he also served for no compensation for many years as my treasurer, which is a very thankless job. But I mean, we really had a positive race. It was on the issues. It was different philosophies. When I was running the first time, my slogan was it's time for new blood, and of course my slogan now is there's nothing like experience. But she actually told Stephanie, her aide, that she couldn't tell her until after she passed. And after she passed, Stephanie said she wanted you to know that she voted for you in the elections after you guys ran. So, which was nice. She was a classy lady from start to finish, for sure. And so I was elected in 2000, took office in January that year, and I've been there 14 years now, and I'm actually going into my 15th. And I'm now the second assistant majority leader, which is the fifth highest position in the legislature, which really is because I've been around a long time now. It's you look around, we've had 80% turnover since I first got in office. People running for other office, people being dismayed with politics in general. And unfortunately, we can't really get a lot of. We get good candidates. I don't disparage anybody who puts their name on the ballot, regardless of party. But we're not getting the crop of candidates and the dearth of candidates that we had before, and that's unfortunate. And I think it speaks to the problems we're having here, which is basically a little bit of a microcosm of Washington. But the difference between Washington and Beacon Hill, and maybe it's because we do dominate, the Democrats do dominate the legislature. There are, Senator Hedlund likes to point out that he's only one of 6 in the 40-person Senate, and there's 35 now, actually, Republicans out of the 160-member House. But it forces us to work together, and we're able to accomplish some great things. In this last session, which we finished, it's an 18-month session, but we're kind of like your kids on the weekend with homework. Everything waits till Sunday night, and we do everything in like the last 2 to 3 weeks of the session. And in the last end of the last session, we passed, which I served on the conference committee. Conference committee is the speaker and the Senate president appoint 3 members to work out the differences between pieces of legislation. When that comes out, it's unamendable. So that you're really working on the nuts and bolts of which is going to become law. And we were tasked with sitting down and crafting a domestic violence bill in the wake of the Jared Remy tragedy. And the speaker had tasked me with being involved with that, and it really in charge of the conference committee. And we did a piece of legislation that is a model for the country, hailed on both sides, and I really think it's going to reduce domestic violence, worked with groups such as Dove to make sure that we got it right and not just got it done. And then we also did a first-in-the-nation bipartisan gun bill. It was supported by the local chapter of the NRA, a group known as GOAL, and Stop Handgun Violence. First time those 2 groups came together on a piece of legislation. And when it first rolled out, this was done in the wake of the Sandy Hook tragedy. And when it first rolled out, it wasn't exactly hailed as a model piece of legislation. And the speaker came to me, the majority leader at the time, and 2 or 3 other individuals of different parties, and basically locked us in his conference room for about 6 days until we were able to come up with a solution that would work. And we did that. We came up with what is hailed by police chiefs and by gun owners as a way to make sure that guns aren't in the wrong hands, but also really focusing on what really is the critical problem, those with mental illness and access to firearms. So I think we did a very good piece of legislation. We also did, which I was involved in, what we call an omnibus autism bill. And one of the things that we put in the autism bill is what's called the ABLE Act. We were trying to get a groundswell from states. Certain states had passed this. The ABLE Act is basically the product of a conversation I had with an individual by the name of Chris Supple. Chris and I have got to know each other through government. He worked at the BRA, and he was in Weld's cabinet, and then now he works as general counsel for the state prim board. And here we are, probably opposite parties, and he said, I have 2 severely autistic children. He said, when they were born, I opened up 529 saving accounts, right? You have those so your kids can go to college. He said, my kids are never going to go to college. But unlike some other children with disabilities, my kids are going to certainly outlive me by probably 40 or 50 years. And he said, I want to prepare. But why can't I prepare and let it grow in a tax-free way, like if I was sending them to college. So we looked, and there was some other states that had done a program. We dubbed it the ABLE Act. We put it in the omnibus bill, and it became law. And then the last week of the session, Congress actually passed the same bill, which is great, because now not only does it grow state tax-free, but it grows federal tax-free. We are, because of the legislation we did, we are on the cusp of being the first state to actually implement it. We're far more prepared than any others, and it's really, and it's one of those things where if you got, it's a wealth management plan. You do that along with the special needs trust, and you really be able to, parents will be able to feel that they've done their best to put aside what they can, and then when those funds are exhausted, the state obviously continues to become the payer of last resort. But we did it in a way that other benefits aren't affected: Social Security, disability, Medicare, Mass Health, so that make sure that those are not affected. The issue in this session is implementing those laws. They were great. We got great press out of it, but now you got to get into the weeds and make sure that they're implemented in a proper way, and the agencies have what they need to do that. As we get into this next session, we have a new governor, new attorney general, new treasurer, same speaker, new Senate president. But one of the issues I hear everybody talking about, which certainly is something that has been near and dear to me, and I think critical need on the South Shore, I filed, and the governor I think is hopefully going to adopt it and take it as his own, is an omnibus opiate bill. Right now, the scourge of mainly heroin has been such a burden on communities, especially communities south of Boston. And basically what had happened is we got government was too late. OxyContin hit in late 90s, early 2000s. Doctors, quite frankly, I don't think, medical community, I think was sold a bill of goods of what it was by the drug providers. They weren't really clear on the potency of it or how to prescribe it. We passed legislation to do a prescription monitoring plan. We were going to limit doctors' ability, but the medical community, they got it, and they started to self-police and self-control. But we really lost about 15 years of kids, because especially in the South Shore, when kids would go to parties, well, it's a prescription drug. It must be okay, it's prescribed, but it's not prescribed for them. So the abuse of that became prevalent, and then because of the expense of that drug, when they couldn't get access to it anymore, they jumped to heroin. You can buy, it'll cost you $40 on the street to buy one OxyContin pill. You can get a bag of heroin for $5. And that's why you're seeing the scourge of overdoses. And even in this own town, right up the street from me, there was a young woman who struggled many years, and parents came home, and she had died on the couch, needle in the arm, and it's terrible. So what are we doing to try to help those families? Number one, we need more beds. This is a very, very powerful, the heroin of today is not the heroin of the 60s and 70s and early 80s. It's cut with fentanyl. It is extremely potent, it is extremely addictive, and it is extremely cheap. So what we're trying to do is not just focus on punishment, because if we put everybody who did, we wouldn't have any room in the jails. We need to focus on treatment. But one of the things that I've learned is when I have an issue, what do I do right now? I text Marty Walsh, the mayor of Boston, someone who knows more about treatment than anybody I know. And so I'll say, hey, it's this drug, it's this community. Where can we go? What should we do? And he'll get back to me and tell me, this person, this facility is probably the best for that. But you know what? In this day and age, shouldn't you, if you're a parent and you're sitting at home and you learn your child is addicted to drugs, maybe just overdose, you're up at the South Shore Hospital, shouldn't you be able to pull out the iPhone, go to the Department of Health website, and have a dashboard and say, male, this age, this drug, this community, and have a drop down of where you need to go and what you need to do? For instance, you need to go to the Hingham District Court or the Quincy District Court. You need to ask for the court clinician. You need to do a Section 35. By the way, you have to be somebody with knowledge of that. Make sure they're there. That information is out there, but in this hodgepodge system, it's not collected, and that's a shame. So that's one of the pieces that my bill does, and I know that the governor is talking about that too. But it's also about funding. But if we don't do it now, it's going to cost us more later. Because let me tell you what we're seeing right now. The heroin has been connected to a scourge of hepatitis C diagnoses, right? Hepatitis C, thankfully, 2 drug companies have come up with a way not to manage it, to cure it, to literally cure it. In 96% of the cases, you take a cycle of this pill, it is undetectable in your blood. The problem is, it costs $100,000 a cycle. So what happens to people who are addicted to heroin, lose their job? They end up on Mass Health, right? Our program, your tax dollars. They get hepatitis C, they go to Mass Health, it's a covered entity. You and I are paying $100,000 for people to be cured because of their drug addiction of hepatitis C, which they should be able to do because the spread of that disease is terrible. But if we can actually get on this on the front end and spend the dollars here on beds and treatment, then we'll save the money down the road. I think that's going to be the issue of the session. I kind of see something coming every year, and I really do. And that's great because when the governor's talking about it, and the attorney general and the speaker's talking about it, it usually gets done and everybody gets to take a little bit of the credit, which is fine. We have a budget shortfall. We have 4.9% unemployment, and we're still $1 billion in the hole. This is going to be a current reality that we have, quite frankly, probably for the next 10 to 15 years. It's what we call a structural deficit. It's basically Mass Health that's blowing a hole in our budget by far. The issues really stem also from retirees, where we have to keep plugging the retirement board, which thankfully is doing better now. It's under great management, but we still have to put about $1 billion a year into that. And the reason is, until about the mid-'80s, nobody paid enough into the retirement system for them. It wasn't their fault. They paid what they were told to pay. We just were wrong on the projections of life expectancy. We were wrong on how long people were going to work. And so what happened now is, until then, for instance, now I pay, until the mid-'80s, they paid zero. It was basically a state match. I pay 11% as a state employee, but I'm basically funding the current retirees. So we have this sort of perfect storm of people who didn't pay enough, living longer, and the greatest generation of retirees, the baby boomers, coming in all at once. And so we're trying to prepare for that, but I think we're going to be in a structural deficit moving forward. It's unfortunate because there are services that are going to be shorter. You saw that this winter with the MBTA, which instead of a long-term plan, we in the legislature really think and live in these 18, 19-month cycles, and we kind of kick the can down the road, do what we need to do, think we're doing a master plan. Maybe we do it for a governor's administration, and then there's changeover. So I think this winter, and who had the ice stamps, right? Me. I had the guys from Minnesota come and bail me out. I don't know about anybody else. I got up on the roof once and started shoveling, and then I realized I shoveled everything onto the ladder, so it took me 45 minutes to dig the ladder out. That was it. I called the painting crew to get it off, and the guys come to do the ice dams. But this winter has really unmasked the problems on the MBTA. We've seen it, and then we see what the problem is when you don't have a transit system. Roadways are clogged, people are back in their cars, and you see how limited we are if we didn't have public transportation. So we need unfortunately, whether or not this French company, they're going to take massive fines. I was not a fan of switching from the local folks who had been managing the MBTA to the French company. I'm not sure we should switch anything to have the French run anything, but never mind. I know I'm on TV, I'm only kidding. But I think they inherited a lot of this. But they're going to be paying some massive fines. We have a group, a committee that the governor formed. Joe Sullivan, who was the chairman of transportation in the House, mayor of Braintree now, is on it, to come up with a series of a long-term and a short-term fix for the MBTA. But you have to realize the MBTA is never going to make money. It's not there to. Public transportation is not there to make money. It's there to move people in and out of the economic centers of a state. But as long as we have the ability to maintain it in a way that businesses can count on their employees be able to get in and out, that's what matters. And we had at the law firm, I'm a partner at a law firm, and we had to shut the firm a couple of days just because employees had to get out so that they could get home. We can't strand them, and the economic toll of that, I think, is still being calculated. I also think there's this talk, I don't know if you've heard about it, some people want to bring the Olympics here. I don't know if the thing with that, right now I'm skeptical, but I have an open mind. I want the group that's there. John Fish is a Hingham resident, former Hingham resident, extremely smart individual, putting his own money up to pay these folks to see whether or not this is something that we have. And that's what you read in the paper, the ex-governor is getting $7,500 a day, which he turned down. Realize that's all private money. There's no state money is being expended at this point. And John Fish has indicated his company, Suffolk Construction, will not bid on any of the Olympic work. So that there wouldn't be any perceived conflict in what he's doing. He is a very smart man. He's very dedicated to this state. He's succeeded in business, probably one of the top businessmen in the state, overcome dyslexia, and is really a wealth of knowledge for those of us in the legislature to be able to call and say, what if we did this, what would the business community do? And he doesn't hold back. He's not enamored because the governor calls or the speaker calls. He tells you like he sees it. So I think we have a lot of hurdles to get over. I want them to have the chance to tell their story. Obviously we're going to go to the ballot, so we're going to have people are going to have a chance to weigh in. We're going to have a chance to have a good sample. If it's on the November 2016, that's a presidential. You don't get any higher turnout than that. I'm not sure I agree with the subtext that it's a statewide ballot, but if Boston doesn't approve it, then we won't do it, because I'm hoping that the Olympics is a little bit more spread out if we're going to do it than Boston. I think so. There's some other areas of the state that could benefit from it. We've seen it with the film tax credit. There's been criticism of that. I'm a supporter of it. I think you can. It's very hard to calculate the one-offs from that, the dinners, the shopping, the CVS stops, the hotels. It's hard to calculate what that is. But there's a certain thing about that Boston, Massachusetts had these different movies made. I don't know what it is, but it kind of raises our profile. Certainly if the Olympics were to come here, it already has raised our profile when we beat out a couple other cities here in Massachusetts. And now, from now till 2017, we're going to be sort of highlighted. So I think there's a great opportunity from now to 2017 to tell the Massachusetts story. And then if we don't get it, we've gotten that benefit. So my hope is that they'll be able to get out there. I want to hear about LA. LA said no state money, no municipal money is going to be used, and it was a profitable games in '84. Now I'm told that the IOC made some significant concessions because they didn't have a lot of ideal locations in '84. Well, I don't know. Let me hear that story. I also understand that Utah was a bust until Governor Romney came in and was able to pull that together. So I want to hear that story as well. I also think at the end of the day, when we're competing against Rome and Paris, and I suspect some of the rules may be a little more lax there. I'm not shocked that Putin got the Olympics or how he got the Olympics, but he spent $50 billion. We're not going to spend $50 billion, and whether or not the feds pick up security is an open question as well. So that is going to, if we do it right, I think be an important discussion from now at least until November 2016, and then potentially till the IOC makes its determination thereafter. It is going to suck a lot of oxygen out of the room from now to then, and a tremendous amount if we were to get the Olympics from 2017 to 2024. But I think it's exciting to be in the mix because we beat out, I think it was L.A. and New York, if I recall correctly. San Francisco, thank you. I'm with you. So it's going to be an exciting time. So we passed a resolution. We authorized the governor to have $250,000 to hire a consultant to help the state analyze the data that's coming in, because there'll be a lot of data, but how that's crunched and how we get to it will be important. So we're just getting rolling into the session now. So there's not a significant amount of activity. We'll take up our budget in April, and the Senate will do it in May. And then they'll do all the hard decisions we made. They'll end up folding and then blaming us when it doesn't happen in conference. I just want to get that out in case Headland's coming here in the next couple of weeks. As I always say, I always come here to give you the truth, and Headland gives you the Republican response. So, have you guys had him? I was with him last night. I haven't seen him in a while. We've been on different schedules. So.
He's over at the Four Square restaurant.
Yeah, he's got the restaurants.
Next to the burned out building.
Well, we always talk. He always says, I'm a businessman. I have a business on the outside. It helps me. I said, well, I do too. He says, no, you're an attorney. I said, well, last I checked, I was paying health insurance, employment insurance. What's the difference? So, let me take a couple questions before I got to go. Yes.
Well, the past question, for 3 years in a row, I had to give Headland a parade button.
Yeah.
And then he said, Garret, loan me $1
Yeah.
for it. This last year, he had a button, said, did you buy it?
Yeah, of course I did. Yeah. Yeah, I brought it with
Pay
me.
you back?
No. The funny thing was, we hounded him once. We always do these different things. We'll bring flowers, when they have the birthday party for the folks who turn 90, we'll bring some flowers, or we'll have a sports team up and we'll do pizza, and he'll always give me like the old, remember Wimpy, for a hamburger today, I'd gladly pay you on Tuesday? Well, that's Headland,
Yeah.
So one time we finally hounded him and said, you have to pay us back. So he wrote a check out of his campaign committee to me, right? To my committee. So he ended up getting calls from the chair of the Republican Town Committee. Why are you donating to that Democrat, Garret Bradley? I said, see what happens when you try to beat me? He is one of your kids. Yes.
We hear at the federal government level that bills are passing that congressmen have never read and have been presented to them hours ahead of the time they have to vote, and they're written by lobbyists and people like that. Does that happen in the state?
Occasionally. There's an occasionally, not written by lobbyists. Anything that's written by a law, and we always get a negative reaction when you have that, but there are times where, like with the bill I drafted for opiates, I talked to everybody out there, lobbyists for the healthcare community, folks who worked in the GPH. I wanted to get an understanding of what all sides would say. So having input from lobbyists or anybody on there is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, having that happen, 2 hours before the session closes, that's a different story. In the State House, we don't necessarily have that. What we do have, though, is we will pass separate bills, and those bills will pass, they'll go into conference. And sometimes you're in a conference committee for 6 months, and without a deadline, it's like without a trial date, you're not getting something resolved. So without the deadline of the end of the session, what will happen is the conference committee will merge the bills, and sometimes they will hit the floor. They have to hit the floor by 8 p.m. if you're going to deal with them the next day. Very rarely will something come up shorter than that time frame. We very rarely, we don't do that except in very rare occasions to make sure we can get something passed, like a spending bill that is critical time-wise. So sometimes you'll hear, I didn't have a chance to read the bill. Well, you might not have a chance to read the final bill, but for the last 6 months, the bill you already voted on if you're a House member, and the bill the Senate have been out there, and you had the opportunity to review that. The final bill, which has to stay within the confines of those two bills, sometimes you may hear people say, well, I didn't have the time to read the final bill. I had to take your word for it. And sometimes you do have to take the words, the members of the conference committee, which compose Democrats and Republicans, so they know what's in the bill, and they can we get up on the floor and we explain it and we answer questions. So yes, do we do that sometimes? Yes, not as prevalent as what's going on in Washington, though. Yes, Ginny.
Well, it's come to that season of the year.
Uh-oh.
Why do we all say uh-oh?
Because you know
You're already selling buttons?
We know what's coming. Yes, we are.
what we want you to have is not the first button sold, but the first button given to anybody of
Great.
grand importance. And I'm going to.
You're buying it for me?
give-
Don't tell
yes,
Heather.
I am, because I can't give you one.
Pete's gonna buy Hedlund's book.
Anyway,
That's great. This is this year's button?
this is this year's button, and it's on our veterans.
That's great. So you guys, has everybody seen it? It's the picture, the famous picture of Iwo Jima, raising the flag on Iwo Jima, which is actually a little ironic. My grandmother, her brother died at Iwo. He was a Marine. And I remember to this day, I tell the story once in a while at some different events around Memorial Day. We used to see when we were kids, we'd see the smart-looking, smartly dressed young man in the Army uniform and sort of the brownish photo that was tattered on the wall. And we used to ask her about it, and you could still see her get a little misty. Even we lost her a few years back when she would tell grandkids and then great-grandkids the story. He was a Marine. He was a cook in the Marines, and he was off of Iwo, which, as everybody knows, is basically a black sand rock, but it had an airstrip. It was strategically important for the potential invasion of Japan. And they ran out of men because after the first hour, which was quiet, there was just an onslaught for almost 30 days, if I recall the story correctly. And we lost the most men in the Pacific in that one battle. And in the Marines, she told me, and I later learned, you're a Marine first and everything else second. So they pulled him out of the kitchen, gave him his rifle, and sent him ashore, and he was killed a couple days later. So it's kind of ironic that that's the thing you hand me tonight. So, yes. Oh, sorry.
The MBTA has been a disaster for at least 3 decades. And people can obviously have different points of view, but from a practical standpoint, it's not a surprise that, we had a snowstorm and everything stopped.
Yeah.
Has anybody spent any real time talking about not a solution, but to address the problem realistically, because there's a deep hole that is gonna take an incredible amount of money, and it's a question of where it comes from or how it's raised, but
Right.
bottom line is anybody even talking about that from the legislature?
We are. The governor, he established a committee of outside experts. It's supposed to report back in about, I think, a week or so. And that's the committee that Joe Sullivan's on. And he put some bright people on there to try to come up with a fix. Now, the system isn't perfect. It absolutely has been, we don't have the money to maintain it. There's no doubt about that. We need to figure that out. The one thing I would say is, much like my roof, it can handle a blizzard, but it can't handle 3 in 3 weeks. And that's why my roof leaked, and probably some of your others. But so I'm not minimizing the infrastructure is woefully inadequate, but I think what we're seeing was this historic winter in sort of really a month. Really, it exposed a lot of problems, but it also was kind of once in a lifetime. We hope. Maybe with global warming we won't. Maybe we're looking at the new norm. But so we are looking at it. It is going to be something that's addressed. I don't have specifics right now, though. Yes. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead. Yeah.
You talked about drugs and the problems with it. Now, my grandkids live in Weymouth. Weymouth doesn't believe they need a deer officer there, which I think is stupid. They said, "Oh, it makes no difference." And I said, I looked down at Jackson Square. I said,
Yeah.
"Yes, it makes a difference to any cop here that has to go through there." But Weymouth does not.
No, and it's unfortunate. That's one of the problems of the budget, that the DARE funds were cut probably 10 years ago. Hingham stepped up and funded it directly. I think the two most important things that I have seen, and I have the numbers and the chief from Hull to back it up in particular, is a DARE officer and then a officer in the school. I'm blanking on the name of what they call it. Yeah, they have a police officer in the school, and we were able to do the safety officer in the school, and that person has become really. In Hull, it was somebody who went to the school and grew up in the town, and that person has been able to take information and diffuse issues before they got out of hand because somebody was there to talk to, and it's been a big success here in Hingham. Chief Perino has trumpeted it. That is a town-by-town decision. Weymouth, unfortunately, hasn't stepped up to the plate with that. I wish they would. Yes?
Two things. First, back up what Peter said, my 3 daughters who are all grown and have children, credit Michael Perino when he started the DARE program as educating them about drugs all the way from elementary school through high school.
Yeah.
As the reason they never got involved. So, and of course now he's soon to be the retiring police chief. Definitely a worthwhile program.
Yeah.
Second, I think one of Governor Patrick's projects was to extend the commuter rail down to the Fall River, New Bedford area. And given what happened given that there's a new governor and what happened this winter, is that even anywhere in the foreseeable?
No, it's just, the problem is, and we saw it with Greenbush, we talked about the fact that the system didn't have the ability, you build it with bond money, so whether or not you have the ability to borrow and bond, that's a different issue. But the maintenance is what's important. And we don't have the money to maintain now, as you can see. I don't see that being, I know the South Coast wants it. I really don't see it, happening. I'm not sure anybody kind of says, I'm going to move to Fall River because it's a great commute to Boston, even if there is a train. I mean, I take the train out of Middleborough when we go down to Marion to see my in-laws for the summer once in a while. It's great, but that's probably about as far as you can go. I mean, that's an hour and 10 minutes on the train. I mean, how long you don't want to be on the train in the morning? So, trains, I get it, they work. But if we had all the money in the world, sure, we'd build it. I don't see it happening. I better get running. Yeah, last question, so I can have the girls. Yeah.
One, Michael Perino is going to be the Grand Marshal of the parade.
Oh, great.
But local aid, we've got about a $400,000 gap between what the selectmen want to do, what the school department wants to do, and they're debating back, well, local aid's going to be this, local aid's going to be that, shortfalls and so forth. Where do you see that falling?
What I talked to, by the way, I'm in communication with all my local officials on a regular basis. I've talked to Ted about it. What I told him was, Ted Alexiadis, plan for last year's numbers, but it would be very hard for us not to get to the governor's number. So the governor's number is higher. I don't know if it's 400,000 higher, but I believe the school committee is counting on the gov's numbers, and the town is planning for the house. Of course they do, yeah. It's great. It's Don't you love town meeting, though? I love going to town meeting. It's a great form of government, right? You blow through a $35 million budget, but you fight for 4 hours over the new snowblower for town hall. I love it. You know, it's great. I hate that. Hopefully we don't get too big where we lose it. So, but thank you, everybody. I better hustle to pick the girls up. I really appreciate it. Sorry we got rescheduled.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All right. Well, everyone have a great week. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate our guests tonight, and we look forward to seeing you guys again. And have a great week.